Welcome back to another video. I am super excited to have another guest on the channel. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, someone I go to the range quite often with, someone that loves his magnums as well, but has kind of a completely opposite philosophy on hunting bullets. And that's kind of why I wanted him to be on here. So, as you guys know, I'm a big supporter of tough bullets like bonded and monolithic bullets. And that's great and all, but sometimes we got to have some other people on the channel to talk about the other types of bullets and why they might be necessary. And so that's what Wyatt is here for. My channel, I think I'm guilty of kind of being an echo chamber on mono and bonded bullets. But Wyatt here, he loves his match style bullets, his cup and core high BC bullets like the Burger and some of the Hornady bullets and maybe some of the other ones as well. Let's just get into this topic, and let's just make it clear. This is not going to be a debate. This is not going to be an argument. We're not trying to figure out which bullet is best. We just want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses for each one and why you might pick one over the other in a certain situation. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, this is more so be educational. I mean, there are guns out there that will shoot coppers lights out. There'll be other ones that shoot match bullets lights out, and it's just is what it is.
So first off, I want to talk about why I pick bonded and monolithic bullets. And you kind of hinted a little towards that. But the big reason is I'm reloading Weatherby and I shoot over bore really fast cartridges. Basically, I limit myself to 400 yards and in. And there is definitely times where I'm going to be taking close shots. For example, I killed my elk last year at 50 yards. And let's just say if I was using a frangible cup and core bullet, that would have been pretty explosive at that range in my 300 Weatherby.
It would have been.
It would have worked, but yeah. I pick bonded bullets because I want kind of the best of both worlds. I understand some of the weaknesses of a monolithic bullet, that it needs velocity. It's not going to open up as nearly as well as a cup and core bullet or even a bonded bullet. So I kind of find the bonded bullet is a happy medium for me. I guess the biggest downside I see for bonded bullets is in some rifles, they can be extremely picky to load for. It's just going to take a little more effort to find that load in a bonded bullet. Now, with that being said, the smallest group I've ever shot in any of my rifles was with a 200 grain AccuBond in 300 Weatherby. So it's possible to get really good accuracy out of them, but they're just a harder bullet to load for. And then why I pick mono bullets is kind of the same reason. Is I'm pushing these bullets extremely fast, and I do want them to hold up. And also another huge reason is my 300 Weatherby just loves them. They just shoot lights out. I sub half MOA consistently, and it's just something I'm going to go with. And with the velocities I'm pushing them at, I'm not really worried about the whole penciling through part. So
no, and I'd have to agree that like my best group I've ever shot out of any of my rifles with the 300 PRC is actually those 230 cutting edge bullets, which is a monolithic bullet.
Right.
But I'm not going to hunt with that one.
Yeah.
I mean, even though it says it can be used for hunting, it's a lot, I guess, harder of a copper, if we were to put it that way.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us why you prefer cup and core bullets for hunting?
So a big reason why I like cup and core bullets, match style bullets, is because I want the internal fragmentation. I see that as a big benefit because that's where I want all the damage to be done, if we're put it, is right in those heart and lungs. The animal's going to die from that. Like, period, end of story. We all know if you really do a lot of damage in the heart and lungs, tear them to pieces, make them soup, as I've heard some other people put it, it's going to terminate that animal fairly quickly.
And another thing I've heard is like some other people will say dumping all the energy or hydrostatic shock. I know that was a big fun word from Roy Weatherby. And I got to think that, back then they weren't using bond or monolithic bullets. He was using just cup and core bullets. and so having that hydrostatic shock is pretty effective.
Yeah, and it's very effective. And the thing with the longer match style bullets that, I mean, Hornady's coming out with, Berger has, Sierra's dipping their toes in a little bit with, even Nosler has some with the AccuBomb long ranges. Is there, as I see it, is it's okay to like, I want to fragment, it's going to do that, but I'm not afraid of it punching all the way through because it has enough meat behind the bullet that it can shed a bunch of weight but still punch through.
Okay.
It, I guess, like for me, that comes with the archery side as well. I do enjoy archery hunting, and it's part of that where it's like, okay, I want to do as much damage on the inside, but if it goes through, that's completely fine. Blood trail, all the good things from that.
So I want to do a little segment here where we kind of flip sides of what situations where we would use the bullets that we might not prefer. For me, like a cup and core match style bullet, and for you, maybe a bonded or monolithic bullet. I'll go ahead and start. I have my 340 Weatherby, and honestly, if I decide to shoot a bullet that's heavier than 250 grains, I don't see the need to have a mono bullet, especially, and I don't even really see the need to have a bonded bullet. Earlier this week, Hunt Simple asked me if I'd ever tried the 300 grain AccuBond, and I just don't see the need for that 300 grain to be bonded at all. It's going to have plenty of penetration. It's a huge bullet. Sectional density is crazy good. Yeah, I don't see the need for it. So I don't know. I haven't really picked a bullet that what kind of cup and core bullet I would choose. I'm not sure I'd go Berger. Maybe an ELDM. I don't know. So that's kind of where I would use a cup and core bullet, is a heavy 338.
What about a 300, like in your 300 Weatherby, what would you use? Because I remember we did a drag race on that 225 ELDM a little bit ago, and we were able to get your 300 Weatherby up to 3100 with that 225 ELDM.
Well, if I shoot it at 3100, I definitely wouldn't be using it on game. But
oh, come on.
That was a little overpressure, to be honest. So
oh yeah, I think we'll agree there.
I maybe 225 plus. I would maybe. I don't know. I'd have to get like really, really tiny groups with it. So
yeah, and that goes into, I guess, a little bit more of like why I like match bullets as well, is because I found the consistency there and the predictability with match bullets in my hand loading is my guns will shoot match bullets and I can find a load a little bit quicker with match bullets. But if I'm going to use, say, a copper, I'm not only like my backup load for my 6.8 Western to my 170 EOLs is actually the 155 LRX.
Okay.
Like that's my backup load. It's predictable with that 4831 shortcut. I think all of them were sub MOA.
Yeah.
But I'm going to cut my distance down for where I'm hunting at. Like I'm comfortable and confident out to say 600 yards where it's like, hey, that's going to be a very good shot with that 155 LRX. I'm sure it could do it out at 600 yards. However, I still want that velocity, so I'm going to cut myself back to 400 yards. I'd still use it for elk and deer.
Yeah.
No problems. Even say I could get the 190 CX out of my 300 PRC to work, I would still cut that range down to make sure, hey, I'm still getting the velocity expand. I mean, we have like the knowledge of how these bullets perform. We can use that to our advantage if we're rifle shooting it to be able to have it perform the way it's intended to, hitting structure with, say, a monolithic, or aiming a bit further back with match bullets. Because, I mean, even at 100 yards, if you're not comfortable, say, with a match bullet or a monolithic bullet, going where you want, you got some other issues to figure out at the range. Because it's like you should be able to pick your shot and make sure it's predictable where it's going to go. And if you need, you should be able to pick where it goes.
Okay, so I just did a kind of controversial video on 223 Remington for elk. I obviously am really against it. Why? I want to know, what is the smallest cartridge you would use for elk? ideally, not something like a last minute resort, like I guess it'll work, but this is something that, yeah. What would you pick?
Honestly, probably a 22 Creed. I would
That's
probably go
small.
with I would go that small. I would
Okay.
pick that ELD, or I think they have an 80 grain ELDM for it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually would pick that one or see if Burger, I don't know on the Burger line on those 22s, but I would go down that far. But then I also have the velocity behind it as
Okay.
well to make sure when it does impact, it's going to still create a very, very big wound cavity on the
Okay.
inside.
I know a lot of people lately are singing the praises of the 22 Creedmoor for big game hunting. That's a little
Well,
small for
yeah,
my taste, but
yeah,
at least it's faster than 223.
yeah. How small would you go for elk?
Okay, so probably 270 caliber.
Okay.
Um, I I know the 270's been doing it for a long time. Yeah, it's a FUD. That's a FUD pick, right? A 270 Winchester.
It
But
works.
I I almost want to say like a 270 WSM or a 6.8 Western would be
All right.
a really good like minimum.
Yeah.
But certain distances with the right bullet, 270 Winchester for me.
Mhm.
I want not just a heavy bullet, but a wider diameter bullet than 22
Mhm.
caliber
Yeah.
or 6 millimeter or 6.5. Now, obviously, there's a 6.5 300 26 nozzler. It's going to have plenty of power,
Mhm.
but I just want a wider diameter bullet. So that's what I pick. But let's get into a topic that's always funny to me is whenever I talk about bullets, people always bring up how it failed. And
Mhm.
I want to talk about examples where the animal died, but the bullet didn't meet up the expectations of the the person shooting it. And I guess the funny part is, well, it killed the animal, and sometimes it
Mhm.
kills it extremely effective. Did it really fail? What do you think?
Yeah. I think that one's the hard one because if you have, I think the poster child of probably the most controversial bullet out there for most people, either they love it or they love to hate it, is
Yeah.
the ELDX bullet
Uh-huh.
because it's either it's not tough enough or and too explosive, or it's too tough and doesn't get rid of its energy enough. Like it's in that weird middle ground where people either love it or they love to hate it. Like
Yeah.
there's one guy I've listened to, and he's had that experience where it's like it fragmented too much standing over a dead animal. Did
Yeah.
it fail? Or even with monos, it's like it killed the animal, but it
Right.
didn't perform how you want. Like there needs to be a connection. Like you understand the bullet's construction, what it's going to do, and then sometimes, even with the monolithic, since they are a tougher bullet, I know people are very harsh with them when they do fail. But with those ones, I'm also wondering, did it hit just the hide, hit a bunch of air in the middle of the animal, a little bunch of, say, dead space, and then just go through on the other hide and just pencil through? Like, did it only hit really three things in that animal? And so, oh, it failed when it really is a bad shot.
Yeah, that's another topic we could get into, but I mean, I see it all the time. People
Mhm,
saying, "Oh, I hate the ELDX because it
mhm.
failed. It blew up," and and but they still had a successful hunt with it.
Yeah.
Or, for example, my Accubon last year, uh,
Mhm.
it appeared to have penciled through, but
Yeah.
it was a DRT. The elk
Yeah.
died instantly. And so um, I still think the bullet expanded. I don't know how it
Mhm,
couldn't have expanded at that range
mhm.
going that fast.
Well,
Just,
you're at what, like about 50 yards?
yeah. And the bullet was going
Yeah.
3,100 feet per second. So,
Yeah, you're gonna get a bunch of expansion right there once it hits and deforms. Like it's gonna
yeah.
shock that animal really, really quick.
But I was just very surprised to see the exit wound was very small.
Yeah,
But the animal died immediately. So,
which
yeah,
I would say is wonderful. Like,
yeah. I'm glad it didn't run off. And
mhm.
yeah, so I do think it's a little funny is, oh, this bullet failed. I still had a dead animal. So
Yeah, and that and we're talking about it, and it's just understanding, okay, is it really a failure or is it what it hit? I think people also can get into the, I guess, thought that an elk shoulder or deer shoulder is level 4 armor plate for some weird reason and is harder than anything or the hardest thing to shoot at,
Hmm.
which I think, what was it? It was a couple years ago. You had that steel plate and we shot those milk jugs of water. And I
Yeah.
had that 212 ELDX, and I mean, I think you had some monolithics, the 175s, I want to LRX in your 300 Weatherby. They both went through the steel plate and um, made a mess on the other side to that milk
Oh,
jug.
and just for the record, I didn't think it wasn't going to go through the level 3 because it was an ELDS. I didn't think it was
Yeah.
going to go through because I didn't think the bullet was going fast enough. I had made an assumption that to get through that level 3, you needed around 3,000 feet per second. But apparently that's not true at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that has a little bit to do with how much is behind that bolt. That, I guess, people refer to as sectional density, which I know we're going to get talking to a
Yeah.
little bit. But that's one of the things, is you also need the material to keep pushing through. So even with match bullets, yes, they're long, but they can shed that nose. They can shed halfway, even 3/4 down the way of the bullet, and still have stuff going through.
Yeah.
And even like monolithics, it's majority of the time, from what I've seen, is it's the first third of the bullet that's going to peel back and it's punching through.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get into the discussion of sectional density. I I'm of the opinion that is sectional density is important for cup and core bullets, and that it doesn't really matter as much with monolithic bullets. What do you think of that idea?
I would say it's a yes and no, only because on a monolithic bullet, say if we're hypothetical situation, 130 TTSX out of, say, either my 300 PRC or 300 Weatherby,
Okay.
going Mach 4,000 feet per second from the
Right.
muzzle or something like that. When it hits the animal, yes, it has the velocity, and it's like, I believe it's still going to kill the animal. But how fast is that bullet going to slow down? Because you're putting so much velocity into it that it's going to deform that bullet so much to where it gets a huge surface area up front, to where it's going to slow it down really, really quick, which would also be dumping all that energy into the animal, which isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's where we want it, is in the animal.
Okay. I would also
But
say at those velocities, you're going to shed petals in a mono
yeah,
bullet.
yeah, I can see it.
Um, but I would say penetration is so good that I would be shocked, even with a little 130 grain bullet, not to put 2 holes through an elk.
Yeah,
Do you agree or disagree?
I'd say I'd have to see. I'll be honest on that one, because I have two conflicting views on it. If it does shed the petals, then it's going all the way through. If it doesn't shed the petals, I think it's going to be big enough that it's going to stop really quick inside that elk.
Okay.
So
Interesting. Now,
yeah.
I've noticed this is with the LRX, not the
Mhm.
TTSX, but I've noticed at least at 3,300 feet per second, it sheds those petals real fast. So, but the
So
LRX is supposed to be a little bit softer. I don't know how much softer. I think you would
yeah.
still lose petals pretty quickly in a TTSX at those
Mhm.
velocities. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I know, yes, I think it's definitely important. And I think back in the day, that's why we had these heavier bullets in 30 caliber. Like you want to go up to a 200 grain because you want to push through the animal a little more, right?
Mhm.
That
And the
was the idea.
yeah, and the partition was, well, and I think it's very interesting on the history of how cartridges came to be, because it wasn't really until the advent and the improvements of the rifle scope that stuff started, I guess, slowing back down a little bit to become more manageable.
Yeah. There was a long
Because
time
yeah.
it was just about speed, speed, speed.
Hmm. And it's like, okay, when you're, and people were having to compensate for those short shots, but also be effective at long range as well. Like 300 Weatherby was, say, like a 200 grain partition. they needed it to be good short range,
Hmm.
like those 50-yard shots. But then if you're going to stretch it out and hold hair out to 400, 500 even, you needed something to still like expand, fragment a little, and still do a
Hmm.
number and still punch through. Like it's been finding those balancing acts. And I think there's a lot of those bullets that are in that balancing act of, I guess, not too tough, but not too soft.
I want to talk about one more thing, and I feel like I need to get something real quick here. Okay, Wyatt, here's a question I have for you, and I might have an answer. And I know we talked about this a little bit before we got on. Um, I think the last 5 years, we're seeing a lot of video evidence that match bullets, especially the polymer tip, are acting a lot like, say, like an ELDX or a Sierra Game King, tipped Game King, right? Where
Mhm.
they're expanding very similar to those high BC hunting bullets. What's interesting is that almost all the companies are very much like, do not use match bullets for hunting.
Or they don't recommend it.
Right. So I'm going to get my tinfoil hat on here, and we're going to come up with some fun little theories, maybe some conspiracy theories of why they're saying no to like an ELDM for elk.
I think the best quote I have right now is from Fillmore in First Cars movie, and
Okay.
I'm gonna botch this, but it's a government conspiracy, man.
Okay.
That's my best interpretation right there. You can laugh about it later.
Okay.
um,
So what do you think? I mean, again, this is coming from the side of me that's like, I don't want to use match bullets for hunting. That's not my preference. Um, and I've certainly have quoted Steve Hornady to a bunch of people that were singing praises to the match bullets for hunting. But for reference, Steve Hornady pleads with people not to use the ELDM for hunting, that they should be using the ELDX. But you kind of have a theory here of maybe why they're kind of holding a blind eye to using it.
I think they've also mentioned on the podcast, on the Hornady podcast, that they don't recommend it.
Okay.
Not that it doesn't work, that it's not recommended, but alas, Hornady is a company and they want to make money selling to all markets, including the military. And I
Okay.
think, if I'm not mistaken, someone can probably clarify for me, probably in the comments or something, but there is some sort of war law or whatever, or law regarding to war, to where you can't use controlled expansion bullets in military. So that gets rid of your, like, say, Nosler ballistics, your Acubons, your mono, some of your monolithics. Like, you can't use those. However, Hornady has their law enforcement website.
Yeah.
I have it pulled up for a 300 Win Mag.
And I mean, Sierra has been well known for supplying bullets for the U.S. military and the NATO. It's up.
Okay, so this is Hornady's law enforcement website. You can kind of see up top, it's hornadyle.com. 178 ELDM. My biggest thing is when we come down here to the gelatin, because they're using their, I guess, their FBI certified
Gel.
gelatin, not the 10% or 20% ballistic gel that people buy, the clear gel or whatever. And it has the numbers. I mean, if you want to come to Hornady's website for the law enforcement, you can look at it as well. We're talking through steel here, and if we want to click and look, we can see an up close of what that wound cavity is. And I mean, that ELDM looks pretty mangled,
Yeah.
and that went through steel. So
Yeah.
and it doesn't specify like how thick the steel is and the thicknesses and all. However, I wouldn't want to get hit by that. Not gonna lie.
So what you're saying is it did not pencil through like an FMJ.
No, it did not. It's still
Okay.
mushroomed. I mean, we can look at the, just say, plywood. I know for a while 1/2 inch pine board was the standard. for a while for the military before they
Yeah.
got into this FBI ballistics gel, and you can still see it mushroomed.
Mm-hmm.
It came
And some,
apart, I think.
yeah, and
Go
I'd
ahead.
say that's a pretty big wound cavity as well.
Hmm. And it retained 55% of the bullet through it.
So yeah, that's interesting. So
Hmm.
some of it has to do with politics, you think?
Yeah, I would say so. Developing confidence in your load, whether it's monolithic, match bullet, or anything in between, is probably the best thing you can do as a hunter.
I think getting out to the range, not
Hmm.
just on a bench, but also in the field, practicing what you would do, will help the most. Because at the end of the day, if you don't make an ethical shot, not
Hmm.
most bullets are not going to at least kill the animal quickly if you just make a really poor shot, right?
Hmm.
So,
And yeah, and I think that this is where it comes in. Is it's that practice, like practice in weird positions. My first deer I took archery wise, I had practiced archery all summer, just shooting 20 yards, 50 yards, how far I could get, whatever, just regular standing. Didn't really think of any positions, but when I took my deer, I was squatted down. I was on my knees,
mhm.
but I was squatted down, and I didn't think of that to happen. But now in my practice, I'll practice squatting down, hit the range, even if it's 100 yards and even just 100 yards bench top. Like, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for getting on. Again, we have our differences on how we
Mhm.
want our bullets to perform on animals. Again, I very much prefer as much penetration and controlled expansion as possible.
Mhm.
I think what it comes down for me is we're not always going to get that perfect broadside shot, and
Mhm.
we are very much error a lot in shooting. And
Mhm.
if I'm going to make a mistake, I want it punching through, almost guaranteed punching through. Um, and so that if I do have to track it, hopefully it doesn't run as far because there's two holes instead of one.
I would say if you want those cup and cores, learn them, understand what they're going to do. If they are shooting great out of your gun, use them. You're
Okay.
not going to be at any detriment or anything. If it's a monolithic, use it. If it's a bonded bullet, use it. The biggest thing that we can have as hunters and marksmen with that hunting is to make sure our round is predictable. Predictable where it's going to go. Yes, that includes a small group, but then we know where it's going to go. I'm not as much. I mean, yes, I do prefer match bullets because of how their behavior and fragmentation and they can punch through. But at the same time, I'm also not against anyone else using any other construction of bullets in order to get game as long as they are doing it in the most responsible way that they see fit for themselves and have confidence and trusting. Because at the end of the day, you need to have confidence in your equipment, confidence that you're going to make a great shot.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Wyatt, for getting on here. I thought it was a fun little discussion on the pros and cons of each bullet. And
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, we both agree go out, shoot, and be
Mm-hmm.
confident and get your confidence with whatever you're going to choose. And
Yeah.
thanks, guys, for watching.